So if there's any question, whether or not you should go vote or not, the bottom line is that there is no democracy without voters. So I certainly hope that if there are some questions or doubts about whether or not it's worth going to vote or whether it's worth to participate in the process, please remember the big picture here, that again, if people are not participating in the process, we've got a more fundamental problem, I think, than just Republicans and Democrats arguing. It is difficult at times. I'll be the first to say that to evaluate the candidates. I've already mentioned the MittRomney.com website. There's plenty of other sources of information, but living in the age where we do of YouTube, of the availability of primary source materials, I would also encourage you all to do some of that. I'll take, for instance, the recent, some may say, debacle, and it certainly was a tragedy in Libya. And if you look at the timeline as to what actually happened, and to be sure, there's still some confusion, still investigation, and things that are going on, and I'm sure that may go on for months. But at the same time, there has been different stories that have been told about that. But you can go through and see for yourself as to what was said when, and you don't have to rely on the candidates, on the political parties, and even to some extent the news media to do that. You can go back and see for yourself as to what was said and when. I think I mentioned earlier my memories of the 2000 presidential election. Certainly since then, this is a new development, but now you all have that ability, and we all have that ability to really go to those primary sources and inform ourselves as to what the truth really is out there.
1 minute.
No. We all agree that an informed electorate is important.
Thank you. We're in agreement. But our next question kind of addressed whether or not the parties can agree in state legislatures or in Congress. The question is, there's been very little bipartisanship in Congress lately, and this infighting cannot be good for the country. Should they focus more on the needs of the country instead of trying to beat each other as a party? Does the president have any control or influence on the Congress as far as issues are concerned? What control does the president have on Congress?
That's a two-part question. Certainly we should be focused on the country's needs more so than the other party. And Justin mentioned something earlier about the power of YouTube and Google and getting the primary source information. I'd love for you to go back and pull up a speech by Mitch McConnell that was made on October 23rd of 2010. When the statement was made, and I quote, since we brought some documents to pass out, I'd like for you to see mine. It says, the single most important thing we want to achieve is for the president to be a one-term president. So the goal of the Republican Party on this particular day, October 23rd, on the eve of the midterm elections, becomes, let's just put this presidency in a total backspin. Let's make sure that he doesn't get anything done. Let's just be stagnant. If he goes left, we go right. No matter what the policy is, it's almost like we want to just turn it over and not read it because we want to make him a one-term president. This is when bipartisanship goes out the window. In the first 100 days, if you go back and look, I was standing on the Rose Garden along with the president on day number 100. We had signed the Lilly Ledbetter law where women were given the equal opportunity, equal pay for equal work opportunity. These were positive strides that were being made. We recognized that we were inextricably intertwined in our fate with this economy. We recognized that we had a common enemy still in Osama bin Laden. We recognized all of the national security threats. However, when there seemed to be a Tea Party movement coming forward, when there seemed to be a little bit more Republican control, the bigwigs in the party said, let's stagnate, let's play game changer, let's not cooperate in any way, shape, form, or fashion. Does the president have any influence on their behavior? Not on their behavior. He can always introduce policies, but he must be true to the good of the nation in the policies that he introduces. On so many occasions, the president has gone to pick up Republican legislation and added lines to it that he believed would be helpful and tried to compromise, but the Republicans disagree with their own legislation in order to make him look bad. This is not good for the country. Two case point examples if we could look at it. First of all, when the president wanted to say, let's change the tax code, he said, the one thing I want to take out is not extending the Bush tax code any further. They said, we don't want to give that up. He said, I'll agree to it for 1 year. He said, but we didn't have to pull it off the table. He was so interested in having some form of compromise that he was willing to go against the policy that he was against from day one, but he needed to see the American people have a reduction in their taxes. I know my time is up.
Well, I certainly think that if there's any guilt here, it's certainly on both sides and it's shared. But you know, for instance, the Democratic-controlled Senate, I've lost count as to how many days it has been since a budget's been passed, but I think we're close to 1,000, maybe more. So our country has not operated has operated without a budget now for years, literally, and the Democrats in the Senate have refused to work with the Republicans in making that happen. You know, certainly, I think everyone agrees that, you know, there needs to be cooperation to better and address the needs of the country. I think sometimes it does come down as to how that is. You know, what's the perception there? I mean, a lot of times I think that you hear the media, and I'll thank my Republican colleague here for making this point, that, you know, the media oftentimes will say that, you know, bipartisanship is where basically the Republicans need to cave in to the Democrats. It's the Republicans that are causing the problems here. Well, no. I mean, by definition, bipartisanship is going to mean both parties working together, and that is what we need. But at the same time, I think in many instances it is where people are sent to Washington or to state legislatures, and they're standing for the needs of the country or the needs of that state. And I think that there certainly has to be said something for principle in that regard. You know, and I think another thing that is more broad here is that there's a lot more at stake now. I mean, over the course of the past, you know, certainly 3 to 4 years, you know, our debt, our national debt, is now approaching 100% of our annual GDP, which is a very dangerous point. We didn't used to be there, and we're just about there now, if not higher. So the stakes are higher, and people are standing ground saying this is what we need to do to get this country back on track. Certainly, I'm of the mind that Governor Romney and the Republican ticket has got the plan to do that. But there is something to be said for standing on principle. But at the same time, I do think people recognize that people do need to work together to make things happen in a positive way.
Yeah, sure. I'd like to take that. Let's go back to that statement of working together. Once again, Mitch McConnell's statements. Mitch McConnell, in the transcript that I'm reading, he says clearly, I want him to change. It's not about compromise with the Republican Party. It's about having their way, protecting those who send them, like the Koch brothers, Donald Trump, the money brokers, and saying protect the interests of the wealthy in this country. Whenever that becomes the agenda of the day, we want someone else to change. We're not looking at compromise. Compromise means everybody gives up something. We're willing to come to the table and say this is what we're willing to put on the table, but the Bush tax cuts have been the one key thing that the Republicans have refused to talk about. We recognize that they have a negative impact on the economy. We recognize that renewing those tax cuts will be regressive. We recognize that they need to be discussed, at some point come to an end. They were never intended to be permanent, even in the mind of George Bush. And so this has been the one thing that has been off the table without compromise.
Can I address that quickly? No, this is not about protecting the interest of the wealthy or special interest groups. When Republicans are talking about holding the line on taxes, it reflects a fundamental understanding as to the role of government and how government needs to get out of the way. Again, I talked about this earlier. Taxes is what feeds government. So more taxes means more government. We need less government. In some cases, a lot less government if we're going to get our economy rolling again and people back to work. So it's not about protecting the wealthy or special interest. It is about standing for a fundamental principle that we've got to we have to hold the line on taxes, so we've got to get government out of the way. It's as simple as that.
Thank you, Alan. Our next question is about our finances, the government finances. The question is, the bailout that the president used to prevent the collapse of companies labeled too big to fail was taxpayer money. And the question is, did that money help the economy improve? And if not, what can we do going forward? Actions can we take to improve the economy on each side? Let's start with the panelists on the left. What can we do going forward to improve the economy?
Well, I would answer that and try to explain what happened with the too big to fail. Basically, I understand it. I'm going to put it that way. I'm an economist and not a finance person. AIG, one of the big money things, firms, and they had insured, one of the things they did was insure bondholders. And again, Dr. Schultz can explain this better than me. He tried to explain to me this afternoon. But the basic idea was that these were AAA rating bonds. That means good. They're not going to go bad. So they insured them. Well, there seems to be some indication that the agencies that did the rating of the bonds fudged a little bit, that they weren't that good. So that when the bonds did not turn out as well as a AAA bond should, AIG was really stuck. Now the issue was, it's too big to fail. There'll be things throughout the economy. My own philosophy as a free market economist is nothing is too big to fail, but if you try to artificially do something about the problem, there's just as good a chance that you're going to make it worse. And I think I could bring in the discussion about General Motors at this particular point. Bankruptcy is not a penalty. In our law, bankruptcy is a way that firms that right now are not using the assets in a way that is making a profit can reorganize themselves. You can handle the debts the various debtors are dealt with, and other companies can reorganize, or other companies can build the assets. I think it was a grave mistake to support General Motors the way they did. Bondholders, which by law are supposed to have one of the first claims on a company, if the company is in debt, were basically, to use the technical term, shafted by this. They got practically nothing. And the UAW, the Auto Workers Union, got a much larger share than they normally do. Now, under normal reorganization, that wouldn't have happened. Everybody would have had to suffer. But my own, I don't like the term too big to fail, and I think given the opportunity the market will deal with problems like that. Will some people get hurt? Yeah. Are people hurt by government? You better believe it.
I'll start off with this, and then we can maybe switch off here. I think that there is something that Dr. Brittingham said that is right on the mark. That in the process of bankruptcy, the people who are usually, the individuals and stakeholders in the business who are usually most direly affected are the employees. The easiest thing for a company to do in reorganization is to fire people. And if we had allowed the automobile companies to go into bankruptcy, that would have been the result. A dramatic increase in unemployment rates in not just the automobile industry, but in all the affected subsidiary industries as well. So he's right. There would be someone hurt, but unfortunately, in this particular instance, the people who would be hurt are the employees of these automobile companies, greatly thus increasing the effect of the economic downturn that was then in progress. Now, I'm not going to debate the wisdom of some of these programs. The TARP program, the bailout program, was actually a Bush-era program that President Bush signed into law. Happily, it has not cost the American people all that much money. The Congressional Budget Office estimates that the total costs are around $66 billion. Now, there's disagreement about this, obviously, but many economists, and this includes economists on sort of across the spectrum, have agreed that there would have been some severe economic consequences had not just the automobile industry failed, but these large banks failed as well. Decrease in confidence of investors across the board, the inability of America to fund its debt, etc. And while we can wonder whether the cost was worth it, there were some clear benefits of the program. What I can say real quickly...
It's not time, I made a mistake.
What I can say real quickly is what the consequences of President Obama's economic policy have been. When President Obama entered office, he inherited the largest deficit that our country has ever seen, a total of $1.4 trillion in 2009. Once again, the Congressional Budget Office has determined that $1.2 trillion of that is actually the result of the Bush policies, right? So his contribution is a paltry $0.2 trillion. Sounds strange, but when we look at actually the effect of President Obama's economic policies on the deficit, what we see is that he has actually cut the deficit every year he's been in office except for one, that first year. In fact, over the 4-year term of the president, he has cut the deficit by $312 billion, which is a 25% reduction. In contrast, were Romney to be elected and to institute his tax cuts, the estimate is that we would see an explosion of nearly $3 trillion in the deficit.
What you just heard is something that's called static analysis, and that says that if you cut people's taxes, that automatically means that the government is going to have less money to spend. And I know if you don't like this idea that if you let people keep their own money, that will stimulate the economy and create jobs. You call it trickle-down economics, but it has worked. It worked when President Kennedy used it in the early 1960s, and he was, of course, a Democrat, and when President Reagan used it in the 1980s. But there is that, and even President Obama, and I heard him in an interview when somebody said, but isn't it true that if you raise taxes on the productive people, you're liable to actually take in less revenue? And President Obama said, well, that might be true, but I just think it's fair that they have to pay more. I feel I have a lot of problem with having the government decide what's fair, who should get what. And I think you can see tonight that there's this discussion. Profit is a dirty word on this side. Profit means that I've taken resources and increased their value. And somebody's been willing to pay for what I produce something greater. Profit is a signal that I am satisfying the wants of people. It is not a dirty word. And the government making better decisions in the market, I'm sorry.
Just real quickly, I'm not sure what you would call it. I would call it just a description of the past 4 years. Whether that's static or not, I'm not sure. But a few corrections. When we look at Kennedy's tax cuts, for example, they were not supply-side tax cuts, they were demand-side tax cuts. They were aimed at the working and middle class, the people who drive our economy, not at the wealthiest members of society. You give a tax cut to a billionaire, I don't care how much money the guy spends. He is not going to stimulate the economy by himself, right? You give tax cuts to 200 million working class and middle class people, they will cause an increase in economic development. As a matter of fact, tax increases, whether marginal tax rates or just marginal tax rates. The Congressional Budget Office recently looked at the details, came out with a study just last month that showed there is no relationship, no correlation between decreases in the marginal tax rate and increases in economic activity. Where there is a correlation that they can perceive, it's between decreases in marginal tax rates and increases in the concentration of wealth in the top 1% of the population.
All right, thank you, Matt. Thank you both sides. So to this point, I hope that you have gained some information, fill in some blanks, able to learn something. At this point, we have questions from the audience. Do we have questions that anyone would like to ask the question that you've been burning to ask? Do you want to follow up on? Yes, in the back here, please.
Yes. My question is to the Romney guys. In regards to Romney's economic plan, what do you have to say to the fact that most of those jobs that he created, they were outsourced to places such as China, and they were middle income jobs? So, what do you have to say in regards to those?
First of all, I don't think that's true. That's a statement that's been made, and the whole concept of outsourcing is one that, if I can produce something better, the outsourcing of jobs, if there's certain jobs that other countries can do better, which means that we are able to buy things, that we're a global economy. I'm not saying this as well as I would like to, but you say the only jobs created are what, middle income jobs? Well, yeah, that's probably true. But again, his job was to, as I understand it with Bain Capital, is to take companies that were in trouble and attempt to save them. Okay, part of that involves some restructuring. Right? And if there are people making things that people don't want anymore, it shouldn't be made. It's a waste of resources. So I think what you're listening to is a talking point, and there were statistics from the other side, that again, this brings up what we've heard from most of this debate is basically attacking Romney. Because, I'm sorry, if you look back at the last 4 years, from the standpoint of, again, a free market republic with constitutional government, there is nothing, virtually, that can be said about this administration that they want to brag about. That's why they're not giving a clear description of what they're going to do in the next 4 years. They just came out with a brochure today, the economic plan. And as I understand it, it's basically the last 4 years. And we see how well that's worked out. You can blame Bush, but that was 4 years ago. Okay, you could blame Carter, but it didn't take Reagan that time to turn it around. In fact, by this time, I think the growth rate was like 9% a year. I haven't answered your question directly because I just don't, that outsourcing thing is I think, kind of a straw dog.
And I think at the end of the day, too, that Governor Romney, when he was working in the private sector, was able to save companies that otherwise may have been gone altogether.
And before he got the words, Bill Clinton praised Bain Capital and said it did very good work.
There really is no attack against Romney. It's Romney attacking Romney. When Romney says one thing and you compare what Romney says to what Romney said, that's perceived as an attack. When Romney says pro-America economy, investments, and he releases his taxes and has a Swiss bank account, and you talk about how and why he put millions of dollars there to protect it from being taxed. And even though he was being taxed at a 14% rate, where you and I were being taxed at a much higher rate, 9% higher in some cases, that's not an attack. That's talking about factual information. That's talking about a millionaire's use of using tax code to his own personal benefit while he's saying something else for other people. I agree that it would be static analysis, and when we talk about cutting taxes, the question becomes, who do we want to keep the money? Do you want the small end of the billionaires to keep their money, to make more money on the backs of the people who can afford to pay taxes? Or do you want it circulating in the economy where people who don't quite make as much, but we need to spend in order to keep the economy going? That's when you see a healthier America. This is what you saw during the Clinton administration. This is what left an actual surplus in office for George Bush when he came into office, and over 8 years he managed to dwindle down the surplus and leave us with a deficit.
Just real quickly, if I can, I think that to be accurate, the job of Bain Capital was to make a profit for its investors. To save a company or not save a company was a secondary issue. If saving the company made a profit, fine, save it. If breaking the company up and offshoring the jobs made a profit, then let's do that. Right? The question is not, let's save as many American jobs as possible, but let's make as much money for our rich investors as possible.
Some of you maybe have heard of an economist named Milton Friedman, who died probably within the last 8 or 10 years. He was a free market economist, and he made this statement. He said, in a free market, the most socially responsible thing that a company can do is to make a profit. Because what that is showing is that they are meeting the needs of the people that are buying from them. We are still at that point where profit is a dirty word. Is there anything against the law in somebody putting their money into a Swiss bank account? If there isn't, is there something wrong with a person trying to? You take a look, John Kerry moved his yacht from his home state of Massachusetts to Rhode Island because he saved money on a yacht tax or a dock tax or whatever. When he found out about it, he moved back to Massachusetts. If there's a way that you can use the tax code legally, okay, to your advantage, I see the very problem. But the big problem I do see here again is this clear distinction, the free market, where profits and prices and signals to people, versus the government making decisions. That's utopian. That the small group of intellectuals knows better than the collective millions of people as to how best to use our resources. That to me is scary.
Thank you. Thanks, panel. Thank you. Does anyone else have a question? We have two minutes. Yes, right here.
From seeing the debate last night, this is not domestic, but regarding foreign affairs.
Can everybody in the back here?
You want our mic?
Regarding foreign affairs, it would seem President Obama spoke clearly what he would do to keep Israel allies, and when Romney spoke, it seemed basically like he piggybacked on what President Obama said. What basically would he do differently regarding foreign affairs?
I think the question is, what would Romney do different than Obama with regard to foreign affairs? Particularly in reference to maybe Israel and Syria, as we discussed in the debate the other night.
To wrap it up, because we're kind of going over, okay. And I don't want to kick them out. We're
sure.
at 1 minute.
We can make this the last half. Okay. Panelists, the difference in foreign policy.
I was understanding that it may be that Romney may not have experience because President Obama has the advantage of.
I don't want to read into the question Romney's experience, but it would be clear that there may not be any clear differences on both sides of the coin for this situation. What we do know is that President Obama has a clear plan for making sure that we don't overinvest when it comes to the military areas just to, dump trillions of dollars here, strengthening our position overseas or elsewhere, because he recognizes the impact that it has on domestic policy. There's no way to keep spending trillions and trillions of dollars investing in a military budget. And this goes back to the Reagan years and Star Wars and some of the other concepts that were out there, and it not have a negative impact on the economy. And so he's recognizing that when you lower the amount of money that we spend in Afghanistan, when you lower the amount of money that we spend in Iraq, when you begin to bring the soldiers home, spend less money, you're going to strengthen the economy. Israel is an ally. We need to strengthen and keep our position with Israel, but we should not be at the beck and call of Israel in senses where Israel is acting out of order. I think there are times that President Obama has made it very clear we're going to study our responses and then act accordingly.
I think there were areas of agreement on foreign policy in last night's debate, but looking back the past 3 years with the Obama administration, I think that the fundamental problem, at least as I see it, is that there's cases to where it's not clear as to who our allies are and who our enemies are. And I think it's absolutely imperative that as the United States, at least now, the world's only superpower, that we are very clear as to who our allies are and that we will stand with them. And if they're not our allies and they are our enemies, that we also are very clear on that. And how we interact with them, how we address them, what level of relationship that we have with them. And I think over the past few years, there's obviously been some very tumultuous things going on around the world, but we have to be a lot more clear on where things are as to where we stand with other countries all around the world.
30 seconds. Policing, and I see our director of police is here in the city right now. The role of policing large territories and spreading yourself very thin is dangerous. And one of the things that countries around the world have figured out is the way you weaken the American economy is to get us put in multiple wars and stretched out all over the globe. And it's very important that we ask our allies to have equal input. This is what President Obama was stressing. He's saying we must have collaborative effort and collaborative forces, unilateral forces all over. We can't go in and be the predominant player all over the country and expect tuition to remain low, taxes to be reasonable, and for a comfortable America and a healthy workforce here. It just doesn't happen. We can't keep printing more money and tossing into the economy while we go and fix other people's government around the world. We lost focus in Afghanistan. We had to come back to point, to the point zero and say, why are we here? What's the goal? Let's accomplish it. Let's move out. We lost focus in Iraq. We've lost focus in many of the wars. He's bringing it home now and it's making it better.
Thank you, panelists. Thank you very much. This kind of brings us to our fine finale. What we would like the panelists to do at this time is to convince us why we should vote for their candidate. And we'll start our closing remarks on the right here. Pastor.
Thank you. Some of the wonderful things that we've discussed tonight, I really appreciate the well thought out questions, first of all. I think we should actually give you guys a hand. I don't know who wrote them, but they were all great. My colleague, Dr. Maloney, has done a fine job of making sure that we articulate the points positive. We don't come with rose-colored glasses on. Has there been some things over the last 4 years that this administration could have done better? Sure. And we're not walking with blinders on and accepting everything that our party platform puts out. That's a dangerous thing to do. We've heard that a lot from the Republican side. What's dangerous? It's dangerous when we don't look at the facts and weigh them out and say, this is what we need to do, and we've done well at this and we've not done well at this. We are willing to go back and take a look at Obamacare. If you read anything that the president has released, he said, I'm willing to make it better in the places where it doesn't work, but we needed to do something because the richest nation on the face of the planet should not be the sickest nation, and we should be able to take care of those who need health care. There's so many things that we have to work harder at. We have to make sure the tuition remains reasonable for people who are in poverty. When you talk about allowing student loan interest rates to go up tremendously, you're going to take the people who can least afford to get into college, and you're going to almost triple what it costs for them to go, and then how long it takes for them to pay it back. So it doesn't matter. You can go, you can graduate, you can get a great job, but you'll never own a car or a nice house because you're going to be spending it all on student loans. And we don't want that to happen. So there are some reasonable things that we must consider, and we must be realistic about the future. I think the best choice that we have before us of the two candidates is to stick with President Barack Obama and return him to office for 4 more years.
I'm in complete agreement. We've heard over the course of the discussion this evening a number of different perspectives on a wide range of issues. Time and time again, when confronted with direct questions about what we should do to deal with the challenges that we face as a country, what we've been able to demonstrate is that President Obama has done specific concrete things to address those challenges, and he has plans for the future to continue the progress that he has made. I think that the case is clear. People have argued or suggested that President Obama has no accomplishments, that he can't say anything, but of course we have listed a wide range of accomplishments during this evening's discussion. Let's just remind ourselves. There's the Lilly Ledbetter Act. Right. There's the American Care Act, excuse me, the Affordable Care Act. There is the American Opportunity Tax Credit. There is the ending of Don't Ask, Don't Tell. There is the decision to no longer try to defend the Defense of Marriage Act. There is a decision to offer a way forward for children of immigrants to this country, legal immigrants to this country, to achieve lawful citizenship. Time and time again, President Obama has risen to the challenge. And I think he has every reason to expect that we will continue to support him in the future and that we'll return him to office in a few weeks.
I think there's an interesting turn of phrase in there. He said President Obama has done. We have a constitutional system of government where you have the three, the legislative, the executive, and the judicial. In several cases, environmental laws being one of them, and the Congress has chosen not to act on something or has done something different. Dealing with illegal immigrants would be one of those. And simply President Obama issued an executive order saying this is what we're going to do. That is not our constitutional form. That is more running by fee. I still say that the issue is, do you want these decisions made by a group of government people that have, in some cases, very little experience in the free market, but basically they are the ones. It's a utopian form of government that we know what's better than the collective, again, wisdom of millions and millions of people. So do you want your decisions made by you in a free market? Or do you want to be dependent on government because there ain't no free lunch, and if government gives you something, there's going to be something taken away? And I think is the profound philosophical issue that I think you have to think about.
Well, I think as everybody has seen here tonight, this election in 2 weeks is more than just a choice between two political parties, Republican and Democrat. It's really more than a choice between two candidates, Romney or Obama. I see this election as a choice between two very different and in many ways fundamentally different ways as to the future of our country and how we're going to get there. I mentioned earlier, I think at the end of the day, the economy is still going to be the #1 issue. It has been all along. It's going to continue to be through the election here in a couple of weeks. We've heard about President Obama's record, and one that I don't think he's too proud of. I can't imagine that he is. But we've gone from double-digit unemployment now to 8% unemployment, and that's really, at least in my opinion, nothing to be very proud of. But when we talk about things like student loans and tuition, you know, those are issues to be considered for sure. But the real problem is that there's no jobs after college to begin to pay back those student loans to take care of that tuition. That's where the real problem is. And again, Governor Romney's got the plan to take care of that, whether it's reforming our tax system to make the tax system flatter and broader, getting rid of job-killing regulations and the things that have come along with Obamacare and the Dodd-Frank Act, for instance. Governor Romney realizes, he understands fundamentally, like we've been talking about at this table here, that it is free markets, that it's people who make the best decisions for our country, for our economy, how we're supposed to live our lives. It's not government. It's not government's position to be making those decisions. So please, again, inform yourself on the candidates, inform yourself on the positions. Don't rely on 30-second sound bites. Heck, don't rely on what we've said here tonight. Go inform yourself, and please, go vote.
Rely on what we've said.
Thank you very much. I want to thank our panelists. Let's give our panelists a round. I'd also like to give the SGA and the BSA a round of applause. Bring it. To make and ask additional questions, most specific questions, but not some that you want to tell you here, but some questions you can ask individually at the bottom you didn't get a chance to ask. So let's join you outside. Thank you very much for coming, and I hope you got your questions answered.